when you get into UFOs, at first it's fascinating. At first it's like, oh my God, conspiracy theory, you know, this is fun. And then you start kind of going, wait, some of this shit is like real. There's no way. There's an astronaut here. There's like a president. There's like, you know, director of the CIA or some admiral. And you're kind of going, wait a second. And then you start diving deeper. And then when you dive deeper, I always tell people you're not studying like events really. I mean, those are fun and you get into those the first few years. But really, if you study the subject, you're like Jim said, it's like, you know, you're getting into quantum mechanics and you're getting into consciousness and you're looking at archaeology differently and petroglyphs and stuff. And you start to really soak in all the branches of the tree. And it seemed to me that all those things combined, it really created a glue, in my mind at least, that tied together so many disparate ends of what mankind is all about and what's been going on. It almost fit like a perfect puzzle piece. Not that I know everything. I don't know if anyone does, but for me, and it just became very evident that this was like, oh my, this is a puzzle piece that fits. It fits in all these things that I grew up, you know, having interactions with, from like religion to government, national security stuff, to advanced technology stuff, to the history of mankind and so on.
I'm curious to know about Skinwalker.
But you're asking Jim, right?
I can ask
Tom, right?
whoever wants to answer. What's going on at Skinwalker, and what's its connection to UFOs?
Well, I am by no means an expert on Skinwalker Ranch. Tom and I know all the people that are involved: George Calm Kelleher and George Knapp, Calm Kelleher. I've never met Mr. Bigelow. I was supposed to at one point, but it never happened. But there's, I think that's a fascinating case. I think, but I don't know whether I can actually discuss that in any kind of meaningful way, because I wasn't there and I wasn't part of it. I read the book like everybody else. John Alexander's a dear friend of mine, and you know, he was there, and we talk about it quite a bit. I think what had happened there was true and accurate and real. But I also believe that when you go looking for the phenomenon, it basically doesn't show itself. It doesn't like to do that. And after 40 years of studying that, you know, it's that low observability thing going on, you know, why we can never get a good picture of a UAP. For some strange reason, it doesn't want to go there. So you mentioned earlier you're dazed and confused. Well, yeah, I'm about as dazed and confused as you are by the whole thing. I have my own opinions based on what I know and based on what I've read, but Skinwalker is fascinating. I, you know, from everybody I know that have been there and done that, including some people that were not mentioned in the book, which I don't want to get into, but it's a pretty serious place and a lot of serious things happen there. But I'll let Tom go and talk more about that.
Sure. You know, what I find fascinating about Skinwalker is that you basically have the convergence of multiple, you know, things happening. You know, so when you look at UFOs, you can find stories where somebody might come out and their cattle are missing, or there's you know, a cattle mutilation where blood is gone or parts of the jaw are dissected, maybe an eyeball's gone, maybe the reproductory organs are gone or whatever. And a lot of like really weird things about it. Like maybe the cuts are in between cells. Maybe there's no vascular collapse. Maybe it happened within 10 minutes when the farmer turned around or something. Then you have people that might have seen lights in the sky the night before when it happened, or, you know, then there's people that have paranormal feelings. They might have seen like, you know, some type of entity that's invisible or something. They weren't quite sure. Then you have poltergeist events in other houses, whatever. But what's weird about Skinwalkers, they were all happening there, you know, so you have all these things happening in one location. But as Jim said, it's like super elusive. It's almost like it'll watch you be there for a week, and then the night you're driving away to go home, it's like you look in your rearview mirror and there's something crazy, you know, and it almost toys with you. That was something that they all seemed to say. Like it seemed like it knew that you wanted to see something, you want to do something, whatever. What I find fascinating is that you have this one location where so many things are happening, and it's documented by a bunch of government people, a bunch of PhD scientists, a bunch of people that have lived there, and not only documented over like a few months, we're talking like decades, you know. And it's kind of a hot spot where you can kind of dig into trying to find why are they all happening at this one location. And what interests me is that I think it gives us a potential pathway to discuss some alternate candidates for where they're from or what they're doing or how it all works. Like, I think most people like to think of UFOs as they're coming from another planet. You know, we found an exoplanet, it's coming there. And how do they travel? Well, they could do it in 30 years if they go fast. Well, the data doesn't seem to suggest that really. It's more what's happening at Skinwalker, where it seems like it's more about frequencies and dimensional, or they materialize. It's almost like they're a displacement craft that displaces our time like a submarine would in the ocean. And that was a lot of what Dr. Hal Puthoff worked on ATIP, was understanding the attributes of the propulsion and the science that they're using. And I think once you think about UFOs using that kind of a technology, then it's kind of like, well, if they do that, if they use that, that means there's things that are adjacent to us that we don't see, we don't understand, but are like right here. And every once in a while, they can kind of cross over. Is it because we're aware of it and can see it and that opens it? Or is it because it's a geomagnetic area where those types of things have an easier time coming through? Or is it everywhere and we just think it's in one location? I don't know. I mean, there's a story that even happened there where they, like, you know, they were there and you're talking about like government grade PhDs where they watch, you know, something in the atmosphere open up and something come through, not sure what it is. And it was a huge event. So they run down to grab the cameras and see what was on the cameras. They open up these locked boxes, and then like all the electronics are missing in the cameras. And they're like, wait, what? Like these were locked up, and who took, it's like a game. And so it gets really interesting where, is it a game? I don't know, but it might be a consciousness thing. And so I get passionate about a place like that because it gives you the ability to really jump into some wild stuff. I mean, one of the scientists there was walking through a field, and they basically saw, they walked past like a cow or something, and then they turn around and it was gone. And then like 10 minutes later, they're like, where is it? And they turn back around, and there it is on the ground, just out of nowhere with like 2 broken legs. So they run in to grab.
Mutilated or alive?
It was alive, you know. And then they run back into the house to go grab a gun or something to take care of it. And when they come out, now it has 4 broken legs, you know, or something. It's like creepy and like causing alarm because number one, it makes no sense. Number two, it's like it's happening so quick that they can't even and I got family showing up from the beach. You know, you see people behind me. But you mentioned the beach. They all went to the beach earlier. But what it seems to be is that it's you know, an issue with time and an issue with moving it like from here to here where we can't see it and back, and then people will see craft, and then, well, I don't know. It's just wild, and it's so fascinating. And I always tell people in Hollywood, because, you know, Two of the Stars is getting into making like movies and TV series and documentaries and stuff, and I just go, you don't need to sensationalize this stuff. You don't need to come up with like science fiction type you know, ideas to make it intriguing. I mean, it's wild the way it is. You don't have to do much to it.
Have you come up with any theories as to why cattle mutilations occur?
Me personally?
Or heard any that you found to be
I think
interesting, credible?
Well, I wouldn't have any science to back anything up. So I could tell you, I'm a dreamer, you know, so I can come up with a bunch of ideas. I have some. You know, I've heard scientists discuss, you know, tracking our food supply, you know, trying to see if there's things that are in our food supply that are affecting kind of how we evolve. Okay, that was an interesting, and there's a lot more to it, but it's not my place to get into that. I've heard people discuss that, you know, it's genetics or something. It's understanding a bit more about, you know, the life here on Earth or whatever. Then you get into way more far out stuff, as maybe it has something to do with genetics with man, because maybe bovine type samples deal with the blood or I don't know, like the glands or something, if to do with, people want to go way out and be science fiction about it, but I just don't know. And I just think that what we are hearing is that people are seeing lights and craft in the sky in areas where they find these things. We know they're happening and have been happening for decades and decades, like not just like a few, like thousands, but no one really knows the reason why. Maybe someone somewhere in some basement knows, but I don't want to pretend that I know, because I don't. But I do know people have been studying this for like 30 years, and they all tend to say the same thing. It's like it's happening in a way that doesn't look like we can pull off what we're finding. It just looks they found cattle with organs, like their heart missing, but no incisions anywhere. Like somehow they reached in and just grabbed it and pulled it out, So it's like, what does that mean? What is that? I don't know, but it's wild for sure.
Now that these, Pentagon report, which we have to get into, and maybe I'd love to get Jim's take first on that. Jim, when this came out, did you feel like it answered more questions? For me, I felt like it answered more questions. I mean, honestly, I am a skeptic. I have to say, as a scientist, there's no one, Tom and Jim, Kurt already knows this, that would be more kind of thrilled, delighted to skip the line, as my friend James Altucher says, and go from the physics of 2021 to the physics required, maybe 2121 or beyond. I would love to do that. First of all, I'd get, multiple Nobel Prizes. Second of all, I would satisfy the personal curiosity. It sounds like Tom and Jim and Kurt, we all have to understand the nature of reality. Because let's face it, guys, we're only here for a short amount of time. We're given maybe the biblical age of 120. That's about it. But if we could skip that line, avoid death, avoid, interstellar, kind of have these secrets to these advanced technologies and to advance knowledge. That to me is the pinnacle of what Homo sapiens could achieve. Jim, when you look at this, when you hear these complaints and so forth, people being skeptic, do you feel like skeptics have a point? I mean, are we just like kind of curmudgeons and we're just not hearing the truth that you guys are telling? Or, you have feet in both worlds. You're in the military and the government, but you're also in the community that Tom's in. What do you feel is the right approach here? Believe everything, believe nothing. How do you split those atoms?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question, and I think you just said it. Believe everything, believe nothing. I'm not a skeptic by any stretch of the imagination, and I was not surprised in the least when the UAP task force report came out. I understood what it was going to be. It's just an adumbration. It was an outline of what they're planning on doing. There was no way they could put together any kind of substantive report, any kind of intelligence assessment based on this in the short amount of time that they had. And they only took, 144 incidents. My God, I mean, that's and just from the Navy. There are hundreds of thousands of incidents that have happened that credible witnesses have seen. So I wasn't surprised. I thought the writing in there was obviously done by the DNI. It was very, very well crafted, very tight writing. I think they took some pot shots at the Air Force, which I'm glad they did, because I don't know where the hell the Air Force has been in all this. Well, actually, I sort of do, but the most important piece, I felt, was the Deputy Secretary of Defense memo that came out at the same time that was issued on July 25th. That memo came out and said, knock it off, cat's out of the bag. We are going to go after this. We're going to develop requirements, and requirements are basically means that it's an intelligence term for questions. We're going to develop these questions. Everybody's going to have to answer them, and we're going to put money towards this. We're going to put people towards this. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. And so I thought I was very, very happy when I saw that. Now, when they talked about in the report, they have these areas, these categories, about what they think it could be, air clutter and what have you, and then it going down. It could be this, it could be that, it could be the Russians or Chinese. Look, I've studied Russian and Chinese high technology for my whole career. These UAPs, or whatever the hell they are, we call them UAPs, we really don't know what they are. They're not Russian, and they're not Chinese, and they're definitely not ours. They're just not. That leaves nothing. left, except they're something else. And what that something else is, I don't know. I was on TV a couple of weeks ago and I called it. I was prodded by the producer. I said, "Say something, say something." And I called it a non-human technology, and I guess that's the best way I can go. But I don't think science right now has the ability to look at this in a way that they want to look at it, and it's not their fault. And it's because there's no reliability here, there's no predictability here. This phenomenon plays with us, it teases us, it cajoles us, it gets close, but you can't get too close to it. Sometimes it appears to people up close and personal, other times it doesn't. But if you notice with the Navy, I mean, what is it actually saying? I mean, are they trying to communicate with us, or are they basically just trying to affect us socioculturally? When you talked earlier about cattle mutilations, hell yeah, cattle mutilations are real. Don't really know what's happening with them. But when you look at what the real effect of that is, all of us sitting here and looking at that. And all of a sudden, our cultural norms and social norms, things change. Things change. And I know Jacques Vallée talks about this quite a bit, and I'm a huge fan of his. Are they here to basically change us? Are they more of a control mechanism? And the answer is that we don't know. We have tons of questions, zero answers. I think science has a huge way ahead of them. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult. But I don't think we have any options except to investigate this. But it's clearly not human.
Kurt,
not human as we know it. Yes.
In my experience, even the people that are very much involved on this stuff would tell you that exact same answer. Jim can explain security clearances and national security stuff. I can't. I don't know that kind of stuff. I just know through osmosis kind of how it's treated. But when I first met a bunch of people that were involved on this subject before I even knew Jim, I remember specifically, I was in one place and, there's a big wig I was talking to, and he goes, we don't ever look at that subject. We don't care about that subject. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that any of that is even real, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, okay, thanks. And then I left that person's company or that person's table and went right outside the door. And there was these other two guys that worked directly under him that said, we want to talk about this. And they talked about it for an hour, and it was like nothing classified. They can't go there, but it was just like some people are more open to it and some people aren't. But the people that are dealing directly with something that's classified, they're never going to even talk about it. As far as the best and the brightest, I guess that's subjective because who knows if the Jasons really are or not. I've always heard that they kind of were, but I think that, you have incredible people at the National Academy of Sciences. You have incredible people at the national laboratories. You have incredible people at the Lockheed Martins and the Boeings, and they're everywhere. And I think that it's not exclusive, like we need this one group of scientists or whatever. Who knows if something's been studied for decades and decades, they're going to choose people that are the best and the brightest that can keep their mouths shut because it probably has these big national security elements that come with it. And they're going to find people that bring value in ways that they need. It's not just like a blanket, like you're a great scientist, we're going to bring you in. I mean, as far as I know, and what I've learned, Black programs don't really work that way. But I'll tell you direct experience that in the very beginning, everyone said that to me. And because they don't need to open up a conversation with me. They don't need to talk about it. They're not going to get anything out of it. If anything, they're just going to get in trouble or make them feel like they need to go back and report a conversation where something slipped or something. So I just don't think that's the right route. But what I will say is I talked to the former head of the task force before it's in its current form, however that works. And I asked him, I said, what's the biggest change now that we were able to bring the UFO subject out into the mainstream? And he told me, he said, for the first time ever, we can talk about this in the halls of the Pentagon. Up until this point, it was always in a skiff underground somewhere,
Yeah,
and then
I heard similar things from Alex Andietrich, who's a renowned fighter pilot who was involved along with Commander Fravor in the so-called Tic Tac incident. And one very valuable thing that this has elucidated is the breaking down those barriers, the insecurity, the humiliation, the kind of taboo for military pilots who are heroes far beyond what I'm capable of doing. And they volunteer to put their lives on the line. If these are military threats or even weather balloons or whatever, we owe it to our war fighters to make sure that they're safe and secure. So taking away the taboo has been incredibly important for me.
What was it that Tom was told that kept him up for 3 days?
Oh, well, I don't talk about that, but I remember, I remember having discussions. The company that I keep with people like Jim, they just, and Hal, and the way their minds. What's really cool about Jim, by the way, is that I've learned how to parse information a lot better. I'm not going to ever be, him. This guy is master spy. But I learn a lot. Like learning how to be a little bit more skeptical with information, being able to put these things together and think differently. But they're all such really big thinkers, and they don't just grab onto a piece of data because it exists and says, oh, this matters and this means everything. It's very much like forming patterns and analyzing over time. So I remember like hanging out with all these guys in the beginning, and one of the bigger things was just about me understanding the stakes of this, because you come into this and this kind of answers your question about like what keeps me up at night or what kept me up when I was discussing things, was not understanding the stakes, not really coming to grips with this being real. Like, it's one thing when you see a video or you read it in a book, and you're like, oh, whoa, this is all, but you don't know if the video is real. That's why it was so important with the ones we brought out, had chain of title all the way back to the DoD. So we knew those were real. It wasn't just like it was on YouTube and leaked. So it's the idea of bringing forth things that where they come from, and you really take it from that point forward and start getting really good data and evidence on people's encounters and the stakes that come with that. And that when I've talked about this as a threat, that's just my words, right? I mean, I would never know the way the government treats that. That's not my zone, obviously. But for me and my own personal research, if something's been here for a long period of time and it really is showing up in people's bedrooms or in front of an F-18 or on a petroglyph wall or in an ancient text down in the archives of the Vatican or whatever it might be, it's obviously doing something. And it's obviously having an influence. And it might only be an influence on where we end up as mankind, or it might be an influence to keep us suppressed in a weird way to where they can take advantage of something, who knows. But it's here for a reason, and it's not really being, forward about its intent. But we do know that we've been dealing with it for a long period of time. And so when you start coming to like the way they think and the stakes involved and the reality of it, and I start hearing about these encounters from the people that were there. I remember, in regards to the question you asked, I was out in Colorado Springs and I had a meeting with a couple of generals, and we were just shooting the shit about all this stuff. And something was discussed that, it wasn't some big classified thing. It was more like things that people are having happen to them or witnessing, and it's an issue. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, I was like, you start to look around you and not really trust your environment. It's like, whoa, like, really? Like, this is real. Like, my mom is really religious. Like, she's like a born again Christian and hardcore fanatic, religious woman. And I grew up in a household where my dad wasn't. So that's part of like the big butting of the heads. And it was a broken home. But I remember thinking at that time frame, when I was talking about some of these things that I just want to discuss, where I couldn't sleep very well, I was like, if my mom really believed that Jesus is real and would show up in her room and float towards her with a crown of thorns, I mean, she would freak. Right. She would have a heart attack. Right. That would scare her, even though she bases her whole life on it, like who she hangs out with, where she goes on weekends and weeknights, who she might date or marry again. Every call she calls me, she's praying. But she believes this viscerally. Mm-hmm. But if she saw something like that, it's a different deal once it's like really real. It's not just reading it in a book and believing in it. And that's kind of what I came to with the whole UFO thing. It wasn't just like believing it. It was like, oh my God, this is real. This is like real. Not just that we're talking about it and we saw it on the news or we saw it on YouTube. It's like when you're alone in your bedroom in the middle of the night, you got to look around and go, who knows what can happen? And that's kind of where I've landed over the past few years, is just like going, anything is possible.
Does your mom think that what you're doing is an act of evil, or you're studying evil, that you shouldn't be doing what you're doing?
She loves me too much and is too supportive to have that thought. So in her head, it's like this, it's probably a crisis of conscience, you know, where it's like, these don't all map up, you know. But this is what I tell people. And I really believe this. I'm not speaking for Jim or the company. This is just my own personal thing. I have a feeling that when we really learn about consciousness and we really learn kind of what these things are, this phenomena is, I think we're going to, like I said earlier, we're going to merge this metaphysical consciousness type of science with normal science. And once it becomes all one, we might look at religions differently, but I think everyone's going to be able to keep the things they love, which is really not all the dogma and the stories that we argue about. But when it comes down to, you know, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, or Godhead, your soul and the physical body, it's all the same three things. That Trinity thing is like kind of everywhere. It's all about you as a person with your connection to consciousness, you know, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit kind of thing. So I think what'll happen is everyone's so scared that religions will crumble. And I'm kind of like, no, it's going to be the great equalizer, that the only three things that matter in all of these things is us as a physical person with our connection to something bigger. And so I don't think people are going to be alienated. I don't think they might, you know, be bummed that the story of the locusts coming out didn't apply, you know, or something. But I think that the things that matter stay, which is, you know, I used to go to my mom and say, like, you know, I'll go, why are you a Christian? Like, why, like, what is it? She, oh, I know it. I've seen things. I've felt things. I just know in my heart. But then, you know, and she goes, and we've healed the blind. We prayed and they can heal the blind. That's happened. I'm all, well, that's happened in Islam too. It has. So why is it happening in other religions and here? And my whole point was, it's not about the stories. It's physics. And people like yourself are going to help us all understand that here in the future, you know?
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.